Hey everybody, welcome back to Windy City Astrophotography. I'm Nick, and in this video I want to show you how to merge your individual mosaic pane images into one seamless image in Pixinsight. Let's check it out. All right, so it's another rainy day here in Chicago, and it'll continue into the night. So no imaging for us here, but I do want to walk you through in Pixinsight how to merge these mosaic panes into a single seamless image. Now we're going to be using for that the gradient merge mosaic process, but there's a few things you have to do to your images before you get to that step in order to make this go as smoothly as possible. Now, in a previous video, I showed you how to plan your mosaics using telescopius.com and then import those mosaic coordinates very easily into the ASIair. We'll be going here for the next step in that process, taking those individual images and merging them in Pixinsight. So let's step into the program here. We've got our view of two panes that I've got here from my most recent image of the Heart Nebula. So I've got them easily named here left and right. Now what I'm working with here are monochrome images. This is the hydrogen alpha filter that I used for these. Now if you're using a one-shot color camera, or perhaps you just want to be able to merge first your S, H, and O from a mono shot, or perhaps just RGB, that's totally fine. It's kind of up to you. I do find it's a lot easier to work with each individual channel with some of the gradients that I get here in the light polluted skies of Chicago. But depending on your setup and what kind of workflow you're looking at, it might be easier for you to combine these ahead of time and then go from there. So it's either combine the individual panes of your mosaic into S, H, and O, or RGB, or whatever channel combination that you want to do. Or you can merge the individual channels all into mosaics by themselves and then register those full mosaics together. Ultimately though, it's up to you. It's probably a little bit more work to do it the way I do, but I do find that the results are a lot more uniform across the mosaic, but completely up to you. So let's begin here with our left and our right images of the Heart Nebula. So what you want to do first is definitely make sure, and this should be the case for really any images that you work with, you want to trim those edges. You can see here on the right-hand pane, yeah, a little bit of a camera misalignment. I was doing this imaging for the HA over the course of 2 nights. So you can see here the camera alignment was just a little bit off. These were separated by, I think, about 6 weeks. So perhaps no surprise there. I could have been a little bit more careful doing some plate solving before starting the imaging run, just to make sure everything matched up correctly. But in this case, we're just going to have to crop these in a little bit. Even with a single night integration here, you can still see there's a few stacking issues. And, you know, if you're dithering and things like that, the edges are always going to be a little bit rough. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to trim these in using the dynamic crop process, and then we'll go from there. All right, so both of these are trimmed in to a pretty good extent. Now you can see I'm using this boosted auto stretch on the screen. I just find it's easier to see some of the stacking artifacts there and also some of the pane misalignments that you might have. It's also, as far as this cropping process here, it's one of the reasons you want to make sure you have plenty of overlap in your panes. You don't want to be working with 5 or 10 or even 15% overlap, because you're eating away at that overlap. Now between these two, you can clean this up a little bit with some background extraction. I'm just going to do that really quick with the auto background extractor here. Let's do this really quick. These are very close. We'll just do a subtraction and we can discard the background model. Some pretty good data here. There's only a little bit of a gradient that I'm finding in between these two. So let's do the same thing for the left. All right, so now we have a left ABE and a right ABE, and these are looking pretty good. All right, so between the left and the right, what is our next step? Well, now we're going to be using the star alignment process. So we're going to be using this a little bit differently than you have probably in the past if you're doing just plain old registration, your star alignment between images in a stack. In this case, we're going to change a couple of things here. Under the registration model, we want to make this thin plate splines, and we do want to do some distortion correction here. Also, with register match images, what we're going to do first is change that to register union mosaic. So what we're going to do in this first step is actually create a larger template, essentially, that we're then going to register the individual images to. So this is just first a very rough, very quick alignment to see how these images overlap and where the individual panes would fit into a larger mosaic. So we're going to select frame adaptation here as well. Now, the one thing that you do want to change here in the star matching dropdown is actually boosting this ransack tolerance, I would say all the way up to 8. I've heard that you can just start with 5, but generally I just go with 8, and it works just fine at that point. Now, as far as your reference image, you can either choose left or right, or however you've named yours. I'm going to use left ABE, and then I'm going to apply this instance to the right ABE. And this runs through. Now, depending on the speed of your computer, this could take a while. Some of these processes for finding the overlap in these mosaics can be a little bit system intensive, but here it worked out pretty well. So what do we have here? We have a pretty good match between the two. You can see there's definitely a line running through, and that's okay. We're going to be figuring that out in a little bit. But overall, we're not looking for perfection here. This shouldn't look like a finished mosaic right off the bat. We just want to see here that it is, in fact, finding the matching stars between the two, and then we're going to run with that. So what we do now is we select this as our new reference image, and we change it from register union mosaic back to register match images. And then what we're doing here, we're now using this as the reference and figuring out what would a registered image look like for each of the individual panes, left and right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply this to the left-hand image. Okay, and that didn't take too long here. Once again, your mileage may vary on your system. Okay, so what do we have here? This is a registered image showing where this left pane would register to this template. So essentially all the black areas are where there's no overlap with this left pane, which makes sense. Now we're going to do the same process and apply it to the right. Okay, and that came out, and we'll do a screen stretch, and we see we've got two images, the left one registered and the right one registered. And that's with this template, this rough mosaic template, as the reference. Now, we actually don't need this one anymore. We're going to just move it off to the side. Here's what we want to do now with these two. We need to make sure that they are going to match in brightness. So generally you do that with linear fit, and in fact you can do that before you do this registration process between the two with the mosaic. What I like to do though is use a script that's here, and this is called the DNA linear fit script, and this is from David Alt, and his website is at trappedphotons.com, and I'll put a link for that in the description. It's a free script. DNA linear fit, essentially you can say have the reference view be the left or the right, doesn't really matter here. But then I want to select left ABE registered, this will be right ABE registered, and I'm going to let that run. All right, so you might have seen that, just a slight change in the right. We go back and forward, so now they are matched in intensity there. Now, what we're going to do is save these two, because when we eventually use the gradient merge mosaic process, it only works with saved files. It's actually not going to work on any views that you have open. So you're going to save these, and we'll put these where we want in tutorial. So we can say this is left, and you're going to want to make sure it's not saving as a ping. In fact, I found that TIFFs actually work pretty well with this. And whatever it selects there, 32-bit. As you get into larger files, it may do 64. We're also going to save the right. All right, so both of these are saved. Now we are done with our star alignment process. we're just gonna close that. Let's open up Gradient Merge Mosaic. So we're gonna add our files. We have the left registered and the right registered. The type of combination, generally we do average. You could also do overlay. Although if you do overlay, that's actually gonna matter what order you put them in. One's gonna be on top of the other, as opposed to the average. Shrink radius, it is going to trim these in just slightly by the number of pixels that you select here. Generally 1 works just fine. A feathering radius, this kind of smooths out the overlap between the two. Generally 10 works just fine. And you can leave the black point at 0 because, keep in mind, you do have a black point of 0 with this large black area of no overlap. So let's give it a try. You apply this globally, and this will run through for a bit. This might be the longest process that you've got, but if you've done everything correctly here and everything has matched up so far, it shouldn't be too much of an issue. All right, now we have our merged mosaic. Let's expand it. Looking great. So we can zoom in on the overlap area. What you want to look for are maybe any pinched stars. You can see around the corners down here. It does get, you do get a little bit of an odd shadowing there. However, we're going to be cropping this in the final image anyway, so it's hopefully not going to matter too much. And this looks fantastic. Occasionally you will find that there are some artifacts by bright stars. If you have a particularly bright star, I was actually curious to see if this would be an issue right here. If you have a bright star that's near the edge of where your mosaic is overlapping, near the edge of one of the images there, you could potentially have some issues. This one did okay. No problem there. But what you could do if that was the issue is in one of these registered panels, you can actually just use clone stamp and take that star right out in the image where it's closest to the edge. Now, it's not going to affect the final mosaic. That star will still be present, but there's something where if the star is too close to the edge of the image, things get a little bit messed up as far as that feathering radius goes, and you could run into some artifacts there. So overall, this looks pretty good. It might look a little bit uneven between the two. I would have to go back and look at some of the background extraction that I did prior to the merge, but I will say there's actually a lot more hydrogen alpha signal on this side of the nebula than there is on this side, so I think a lot of that difference is actually just coming from the nature of the signal. But if you wanted to even it out quite a bit more, you could go back and do some careful background extraction prior to the merge as well. Now, it's possible you'll run into some images that just don't work very well. For instance, if you have a lot of noise, or if there are a lot of background stars and it's interfering with what you're able to do. In that case, there are a few things that you can do in this star alignment, settings here. The ransack tolerance would be up to 8 already. If you had already set that maybe a little bit lower, you could boost it all the way up to 8 to try and get those star matches happening. You could also increase the ransack iterations to 4,000. That might help with matching up those stars. If the issue is noise, you can actually go into the star detection system section here, and in noise scales, you can boost it up to 1 or 2, and that might help. If you have a lot of elongated stars in the corners, you could drop your maximum distortion down to, I guess, as low as 0 if you really needed to. Generally, the default there is 0.5, but with elongation, maybe you had some sensor tilt or something as well that could affect things. You can try and get around that by decreasing that distortion. And if you have a lot of background stars, maybe it's just part of the sky that there's just a ton of stars sitting in the background there, and it's having trouble maybe matching those stars individually, you could increase the log sensitivity here. Default is -1, but take it up to 0 or even higher, and that would hopefully solve the issue for you as well. Okay, so you might be wondering, okay, I've got 2 panels here. What if I've got 3, 4, 6, 8, 10, whatever it might be? Well, I would always say, always only be merging 2 panels at once. That's how this seems to work best. I've tried maybe doing 3 at once, or some combination thereof, and things just always seem to get messed up. So I found that it's best just to do 2 at once. Now, let's say you have a 4-panel mosaic. What would that look like, and how would that workflow go? Well, I've got here 4 panels from a mosaic of the North America and Pelican nebulae that I did a couple months back. It was pretty low integration time. These are slightly noisy, but I found the best way to do this was actually to approach it by merging the top 2 together and then the bottom 2 together. Those were in separate mosaic workflows. So I've got the top merged and the bottom merged here. So then once we have these 2 merged, we can then treat these as individual images and do the whole process over once again. So I'm going to show you that to you really quickly here. Let's crop in this top one because we really want to have those black boxes out of there. The sides look okay, but just in case, I'm just going to bring these in just slightly to make sure we're all good. Okay, so the top is done, and the bottom, let's bring this top in and the bottom as well. I'm actually going to maybe increase this just a little bit, just so we're just inside where that is. All right. So these are now cropped in. So we're going to do star alignment once again, and we're going to do thin plate splines, distortion correction. We're going to first do a mosaic. So remember, we're going back to the very beginning here. We need another new template that shows a merged view of what these 2 are going to look like. And we'll do some frame adaptation as well. Let's take the top merged as the reference image, and we're going to apply this to the bottom. Okay, so that didn't take too long. Let's take a look. Great, this is a good just template. This can be rough. Actually, it looks pretty good between the 2. These images already had some pretty careful background extraction done on them. So now what we're going to do, we're going to switch our working mode here once again to register match images, and we want this merged template to be our reference image. So now let's apply this to the top. All right, so we have our top merged mosaic. This large black area where there was no overlap between the 2. Now let's apply this process to the bottom. All right, and there is our view of the bottom. So we have a top and a bottom. Now we do want to do the DNA linear fit, which you can close out star alignment here. I'm pretty bad at keeping my workspace clean here. Actually don't need that view to be expanded. We can close these up, and also these ones that are in the back can close as well. Just try and keep it nice and tidy here. All right, so we have a top merged registered and a bottom merged registered. Before we save those, I do want to run the DNA linear fit script, which we'll do here. So bottom merged, sure, and then we do top merged registered. Let's run between the 2. The larger these images get, the longer it's going to take for some of these processes to run. And I believe that's done. Ooh, they were very close already. So we did some, pretty careful, I think, if I recall, did some linear fit prior to merging the individual panes together as well. So I think they were all pretty well matched to begin with. All right, so let's save these. All right, so we have these 2 saved, and now we're going to add those saved files to the gradient merge mosaic process. Okay, now we're going to leave these all as the defaults there, and we'll do a global application. Okay, let's check it out. Here we have a full 4-panel mosaic. It's all merged together. The overlap lines here look really nice. No issue there, and I'm really happy with how that came out. So I would then proceed with, if I had maybe the sulfur or the oxygen channels on this, I would then proceed with merging those together, crop all those down, doing a star alignment to match those channels together, and then eventually do the channel combination as well, and then continue with my processing from there. So hopefully that clears up the mosaic process in Pixinsight for you. It's not exactly complicated, but there are a few steps there. And let me tell you, if you miss one of these settings in there, things can go awry pretty quickly. as with most things in Pixinsight. Well, if you found this video useful and you think others might as well, definitely give it a like. Also, don't forget to subscribe to Windy City Astrophotography. Clear skies. We'll see you next time.